One of the most fun things about chess is to watch other players play the game. We analyze the games of some of the best players in history. We analyze the games of some of the best players in the world today. We laugh at people brave enough to submit their games for my Guess the ELO series. We like watching chess computers demolish each other. But there are few things more exciting in the world of chess than seeing who's gonna be the next prodigy. And in this video, I'm going to introduce you to Abhimanyu Mishra. Abhimanyu became the youngest 2000 rated player ever in the history of the US at age 7 years, 6 months, and 22 days. He then became the youngest ever 2200 or national master rated player in the United States at 9 years old, 2 months, and 17 days. Then in November 2019, he became the youngest international chess master of all time at 10 years old, 9 months, and 20 days. He surpassed the record of Pragnananda Rameshbabu from India by 17 days. And now, he's on the verge of becoming the youngest grandmaster in the history of the game of chess. Abhimanyu is currently playing chess tournaments in Europe, and he's earned 2 of the necessary 3 grandmaster norms, and his 2475 live rating. He's got to get to 2500 to become a grandmaster. In this video, I'm going to show you 2 of his recent wins in these chess tournaments in Europe, and then after that, we will look at some of his statistics and some of these youngest grandmasters who ever made it. Here we go. So Abhimanyu's been traveling in Hungary, and there's a lot of these closed round robin tournaments where you know your players in advance. You can prepare for white with the black pieces, and you know how many points you need to score because there's various criteria to fulfill to become a grandmaster. If you're not familiar with that, watch this video and then go watch the video that I made called How to Become a Chess Grandmaster. It shows you everything. Okay, this is a tournament that he played in April, late April. And his opponent begins with f4. This is the round 7 or 8, so he has to win with the black pieces of Abhimanyu. And his opponent starts out with the bird defense. Oh, sorry, not bird defense, this is bird opening. And it becomes something known as a reverse Dutch, which is kind of funny because it's like d4, f5, but with colors flipped. So white is just developing, and here Abhimanyu plays an interesting move, plays b5, which is kind of non-standard, but white hasn't put any pawn on this side of the board. And one of the things that I want to draw attention to throughout this video is how does a 12-year-old get so good? I mean, there's natural talent, and Abhimanyu is said to work on chess 8 to 9 hours a day. I mean, that's nuts. Even at my peak to become an international master, I studied maybe 4 or 5 hours a day. So I hope he becomes a GM. You get very good by really preparing well in the opening, and then kind of taking it from there and filling in the gaps. And what happens when you get an opening that looks like this one, where, I mean, you don't study positions that look like this, okay? Like, most kids have fantastic memories, but they really rarely get a position on move 10 when nothing has been traded, no pawns or pieces. Well, this is where some of Abhimanyu's kind of very mature playing style comes in. So h3 by white, rook e8. His intention is either to launch down the middle, or launch on the queen side. And since white plays a3, a5 is necessary, we have a trade, we have rook takes a8, bishop takes a8, and black is a little bit better here. Black is a little bit better because of the space advantage in the center. White played this kind of passive setup, although the bishop is a little bit active. And probably white needs to play moves like g4. The point being that, for example, if black just does nothing, then you will play g5, then you will play maybe h4, maybe you'll bring in the queen because you push those pawns so that open line exists, and that is the way white would play this position. Black, meanwhile, after g4, maybe has to strike back in the center, maybe prepare just to stop g5, but white plays queen a1. White instead focuses kind of on this line and the diagonal with the queen and the bishop. Bishop b7, knight e5, and bishop f8. You'll notice that rook e8 was played a few moves ago by Abhi, and he plays bishop f8, which is just... It's funny that retreating moves in chess are actually oftentimes quite necessary. In fact, if you plug this position into a computer, it literally tells you to play bishop f8. Just to get the bishop out of the way so you can take this knight without getting forked, right? Because you would have gotten forked otherwise. Queen a7. White infiltrates, black plays queen c7, and now the threat is to play rook a8 and trap the queen completely. Oh, white goes back. White does this because if, for example... well, I guess you didn't really have anything to do. I mean, maybe you're thinking that your opponent's going to repeat moves, or maybe you're thinking that after rook a8, you will just play queen b1 and just maybe c3 and have the queen on this open line. So that is always a possibility. Bishop d6. So now we're ready to kick the knight out. Knight takes d7, knight d7, and here's the most important moment in the game. Okay, the position is completely kind of obvious in terms of like what is going on and where. Both sides have all 7 pawns kind of mutually standing around. The A file is open for black, but you're never really going to make it there. When both sides have 7 pawns, it's a closed position, so you're looking at the pawn breaks. D4 looks interesting, but white can probably just block everything. Not to mention if white really wants to just gamble and take everything and just call your bluff, take that extra pawn in the center, that might be something. Maybe you play e5. E5 looks good if they take. If they take, you look like a bloody genius because, I mean, you just open everything up. But they don't have to take at all. Like, e5 is kind of hitting into nothing. So there's one more break, and that break is c4. I guess that you could also argue g5 is a pawn break, but g5 is just an idiotic move. C4. Here's why. B takes c4, d takes c4, white chooses to play e4. Now, if white had played dc4, dc4, I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna put your bishop in jail. That's gonna be really bad for white. So instead, white does this and is ready to reroute the bishop. Although, still, I would definitely play this move because you can beat your opponent to the diagonal. Like, that's what I think after. But even bishop c5, d4, like, this position must be excellent for black. This is what I would play. But Abhimanyu is a bit more positional. So he plays knight c5, and his intention is actually not to lock in the bishop. It's actually to transfer the knight to a more active square, and then and only then play c3 to also continue the journey with the knight. He improves the position of arguably his worst piece. Both sides, both ways to play the position are completely fine. One is far more concrete, meaning playing c3 right away. White plays king h2, bishop c5. One thing I've noticed about Abhimanyu's playing style, he's really good at identifying when to trade what, and how to change the pawn structure. So he plays bishop c5 because it's white's only active piece. White doesn't trade. Now that the opponent is just about ready to open the file, you play c3. Then you, of course, back up with the bishop because it was hanging. That's not really rocket science. d5, so that the bishop does not get trapped. White is trying to make some progress, but because you have transferred your knight from d7, it's now time to justify the positioning, attack the rook, and now we take on d5. White at this point begins to panic, probably also low time, and goes all in with f5, looking to attack, de4, f6. But the one thing about being a very talented player, very strong player, is you have to withstand counterattack. They say that the most dangerous opponent is the one that's damaged, right? I mean, the same thing is maybe for a fighter or an animal. The most dangerous one is the one that's wounded, so they're going to try to take your head off. So you play g6. Okay, you can make the case that he probably can take this pawn and still be okay, but he chooses not to weaken his king. Bishop comes back to f4, and now rook a6. This is a very professional move, getting another piece into the attack. Queen c1 and rook f6. Again, white is relying on some sort of counterplay, but again, when you're a good player, you see through the nonsense. Rook to f2 infiltrates, queen e3, and, well, you finish things off in style here with the very nice rook takes g2. Very forcing, because now you have queen d2, which is just very clean. It hits the queen and the rook and the pawn. The only way for white to survive this is to play something like queen f2, and queen f2 doesn't survive at all, because while it guards the rook, there is e3 check, and there you go. Which this bishop didn't really have to do much all game. It kind of stood around. So queen d2 is very nice. You're going to pick up this pawn. If takes, takes. I'm promoting, and that knight that I transferred there, you see? The foresight of the 12-year-old prodigy to see. I mean, he didn't envision this exact position when he played this maneuver, but he activated his piece, and then it ultimately paid off. He also, in this position, can play knight c4, forking. This also wins, and then e3 and breaking through. And he plays knight d1. Knight d1's the funniest move of the game. The knight just makes it to the final rank, the queen takes, and now beautiful cleanup process. Queen infiltrates, destroys everything, bull in a china shop, and now you just trade queens. You're up 3 pawns, and something tells me that you will win this game. The knight tragically ends up on the a1 square, and let's just put it this way. If you're in an endgame and your knight's on a1 like this, it's probably time to resign. It was probably time to resign some moves ago, but Abhimanyu won this game. This was the tournament that he had played in April. And in this tournament, he finished with 7 points out of 9 in a tie for first. I'm looking at the tournaments here on the other monitor. He had 7 out of 9. He won. I believe he was undefeated. If he was not undefeated, that means that he lost the game, and that means that he probably drew 6 and won 2, or won 7 and lost another, but I don't think he even lost 2 games. This next game that I'm going to show you is the game that he played a few weeks later. And by the way, in this tournament, he earned his first GM norm. So he has 1 GM norm now. Now it's May. It's May, and we are playing another tournament, also in Hungary, some miles away. Different players, but his opponent is very strong Czech grandmaster, Wojtek Plot. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know that that's also a name in Polish. One of my coaches, one of the only coaches I've ever had, is named Wojciech, but he's from Poland. He's not from the Czech Republic. And 2556. I mean, obviously, no joke of an opponent. So, d4. One thing about Abhimanyu, he's played e4 his whole life. And if you've made it this far in the video, you're going to get some very interesting scouting report here. He's played e4 his whole life. And when you play e4, the 2 major defenses you have to deal with are e5 and c5. But if you look at the database, you know, even against Karo Khan, where Abhimanyu used to play the most critical line, which is the advanced variation, he wasn't always beating titled players. And it's interesting that he switched his repertoire completely. And it's a supercharged repertoire. Like, I think he's studying some of the most advanced d4 courses in the world. And he has really good prep against a lot of Black's major defenses. And oftentimes when you play grandmasters and they're playing a kid, they will deliberately take the kid out of prep. So Mr. Plot plays this, which is d4, d6, and bishop g4. It's a defense. It's known as the Wade variation, not Dwayne Wade, but Wade variation. And there's many lines where you take, in this case you don't, because you're not going to damage my structure. You usually take to damage white structure, so Black plays c6. The problem when you're playing Black and you play nonsense, this isn't a garbage opening, but it's a little bit nonsense. Of course, it also matters if Magnus played this against me, he would kill me 10 times out of 10. Maybe I would make 1 draw. But in general, when the level is a lot closer, White is going to be in a very good situation because Black is not playing one of the mainline defenses. So in trying to get your opponent out of prep to think that you're going to outplay them, you volunteer yourself for a worse position. So Black plays a5, e5. We have a very imbalanced structure. Already some decisions can be made with pawn play in the center. And Abhimanyu says, you know what, I played e3 a while back to kind of deal with this, and now I have dealt with this pin. So let me make a second move with my e-pawn, because I'm very well protected in the center. This is very good for me. And I want to activate my bishop, okay? So he plays e4. Black plays bishop e7, bishop e3. There we go. We've activated our pieces. Now, what do you do? How do you play a position with no trades for an advantage? Okay, step 1, d5. Why d5? Well, the structure on the board resembles that of a Philidor defense, kind of, which is a defense where Black plays d6, e5 against White's e4, d4. White has included the move c4, which is good against b5 and d5, which is standard counterplay. Black already has committed a5. So Black's pawn is usually on a6 and tries to play b5. And so Abhimanyu plays d5. His logic is that if Black takes the pawn, he takes, and this is very weak, he will transfer pieces into the queen side and crush his opponent. If his opponent pushes, then everything that I just said, all the same, except now, what the hell do you do with those pieces? Right? Like, Black has completely killed the activity of 2 of his pieces. And if Black ignores the pawn push to d5, well, then we continue expanding. Yes, you can en passant me. Yes, and you can trade some pieces on the queen side, but now I'm going to kick out your bishop. And here, a very professional move. Very professional solution to this position, knight to d2. Offering a trade of bishops. So, for example, if bishop e2, then White plays queen e2, I already have a bunch of light squares replacing my light squared bishop, and I will slowly expand and suffocate you to death while your pieces stand here with no heir. So, Wojciech decides to keep the bishop on the board, but that also comes with a drawback in the sense that, I mean, you're not, like, now you got 4 pieces that don't leave an impression on anybody. This is kind of a close position, but it's a little bit different than the last one. It's not even pawn breaks here as much as White is trying to steamroll Black. So Black plays rook c8, queen b3, just improving the position, trying to create a little bit of counterplay. And now we immediately punish our opponent for removing the guard of the square, bishop to g4. With this move, we add some layer of pressure to this knight. We also maybe want to go c5, b5 in the future. It's just annoying. It's a nuisance. So Black goes back, offering us a repetition of moves. Now, you are 12 years old. You are playing in a closed round-robin tournament. It's kind of, I believe it's maybe like late in the event. You have to make a decision. Do you take the draw against the grandmaster? Well, Abhimanyu says, no, thank you. I am going to push a pawn in front of my king, perhaps counterintuitively, but I will prevent the knight from coming to f4. Queen d8. Now, this actually can sometimes come as a shock. Declining a repetition against somebody who is really desperately hoping for a repetition of moves because their position is not very good can really be psychologically very annoying. So queen b2, not doing too much. Maybe knight is coming to b3, c5, b5, etc., etc. Bishop g5. Good idea here from Wojtek. He's trying to trade the bishop on g3. This is probably Abhimanyu's best piece of these four. It's the one that's kind of patrolling everything, and since you have a lot of pawns on light squares already, your dark squares are a little bit of a liability. Takes. Now, again, we push a pawn in front of our king. h4 to kick out the queen. Queen goes back. We have created some weaknesses. Now, Abhimanyu looks to do something concrete. dc6, bc6, takes, and rook a1. And the whole point here is that if this rook trade happens, these pawns are very weak. Very weak. This pawn is not so weak. Because if I play something like queen b6, I just play b5. Like, I'm just going to go b5. A move like knight takes g3 looks like it's winning a pawn. Because of this, it's actually not winning a pawn at all. Because you have queen a8 check, back rank problems. You will take on c6, and you will probably make another queen, which is not good. 2 queens versus 1 is not any good. Wojtek decides not to trade, but that allows rook a6. And now, you see, this all goes... You know when these pawns were pushed? On the first 3 moves of the game. You see that? On the first 3 moves of the game. And that is, when you are a good positional player, you oftentimes will freeze your opponent. Like, they can't do anything. You freeze them. And now he plays queen a3. He has his little bit of infiltration. You give him an inch, he's going to take a mile. Rook a7. Knight f8, b5. We're rolling. No respect for the grandmaster. You want to be a grandmaster, you can't respect grandmasters. I should take my own advice. Takes, queen d8, rook back to a6. Now that pawn on d6 is absolutely nowhere to go, because if you push it forward, I don't really care about the pawn. I care about the square. And now I hit the queen and the pawn anyway, escorted by my queen on a3. So rook c8, bishop c4. Notice how everything is so controlled. Like, he just very methodically improves his position, plants the bishop on d5, although in this case, maybe knight was even stronger. Plays knight c4. The last, like, 10 moves, he's just went forward. Rook a8, full steam ahead. I told you he trades pieces at the right moment. I just elbowed my desk so it shook. I told you he trades pieces at the right moment, right? I told you. Now, he could trade the queen. He chooses to take with the bishop, but now his b-pawn. His b-pawn's just promoting. h5, queen a7. Escort the pawn. Bishop back to c6. That's it. He's got the perfect setup. The black queen is negated out of play. So here Wojtek goes for counterplay. And grandmasters are very tricky. You can make a second queen and then you can get checkmated in 2 moves. It's never too late to hang mate in 2. You are fully aware of that, I am sure. Just go look at some of your most recent games. Knight takes b7, bishop b7, queen f3. The grandmaster is desperate. He has sacrificed the piece for a pawn. He's infiltrated, but he has no actual threats. And if he takes on e4, well, then we're just going to trade. You're not going to kill me with a queen and a horse when I have an extra one of those, right? You can check me, but I'm just going to hide. I mean, I'm going to be fine. And so we have f5, but takes, queen d1, and here the final move of the game. Actually, probably one of the only moves that keeps advantage for white, so feel free to find it. My hint for you while you're paralyzed here with this pin is simplify. You're out material, so simplify. Feel free to pause. And the final move of the game is queen to d2, because it unpins in a very flashy way. The knight is hanging, but it's guarding the queen, which is attacking this queen, and Wojtek can't do anything. For example, if he takes, he's just lost. So if he moves his queen out of the way, knight probably b takes. I mean, really, I'm not even sure it matters, but let's say you take like this. This guards this and this. This is guarded. That's guarded. That hits the bishop. The bishop, most importantly, covers the diagonal, and the king is safe. And so after queen d2, he defeated Mr. Wojtek Plot. And in this tournament, Abhimanyu scored 8 out of 9. I mean, you can't top off 7 out of 9 much better. He got 8 out of 9. So now he's got 2 GM norms. And he is 25 to 30 rating points away from becoming the youngest grandmaster of all time. And he has, by September 5th, 2021, to beat that record. So this is the article, and we'll talk now a little bit more about Abhimanyu's statistics. He just recently got his 2nd GM norm. This article on chess.com, I've linked it in the description. You see him playing against a lot of different players. All these 10, you all should know that these tournaments require people from all over the world to participate. You cannot have more than 4, as you see, 4 Hungarians. You cannot have more than 4 people from the same federation, which means that you have players from India, you have a player from Poland, you have a player from Slovakia, from Jordan, and Abhimanyu from the United States. You can imagine it costs a lot of money, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. Same thing for this next tournament. And that's basically what he's doing right now. But Abhimanyu is still there, and he's actually still playing a chess tournament. He's playing in the May edition of one of these tournaments that he just played, and that can be followed anywhere. I believe it's called the Vezerkebzo. I hope I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but Vezerkebzo GM. You can follow it on any website. Chess.com events is a good one. Follow Chess is a very clean app. That's the app that I use. I just turn it on, and you see all these live games. He actually just lost. He has 1.5 out of 3. He lost to Grandmaster Gabor Nagy, also from Hungary, very strong player. I played him in a Blitz tournament, but it's fascinating because it's looking like Abhimanyu is going to beat this record, and he's not going to make it close. I mean, literally, he might beat it in the next weeks, which would mean that he's going to become the youngest grandmaster of all time at the age of 12 years and like 4 months. And we can actually just as a parting thing look at the top 10 youngest chess grandmasters ever. This is a fascinating list. Sergei Karyakin, World Chess Championship challenger in 2016, did it at 12 years 7 months. Gukesh from India was very close, but he missed it by 17 days, which really sucks. And obviously here you can see 2 players from Uzbekistan, 4 players from India, and there is Magnus Carlsen at age 13. What a bum. He's never going to make it anywhere in chess, right? Obviously 2 players from China as well. Now, the fascinating thing about this is that if you think about it, Abhimanyu did not play a chess tournament in 2020. Just think about that for a second. It's 2021. The pandemic delayed what could have been a sensational breaking of this record. He could have been the youngest GM at 11, which, by the way, isn't that ludicrous? Like, at 11, I was still half playing chess at the rating of like 1800, 1700. I was probably still eating the pieces and putting them in my nose. Like, it's nuts. It's nuts. And the age of information, the age of technology do amazing things. Yeah, there is a GoFundMe that Abhimanyu's dad and mom, I believe, put together. It's in the description, so if you made it this far in the video, as always, I very much appreciate you. Feel free to donate to it, because they've been living in Europe for what is like a month. And this is standard practice, by the way. The United States really, up until recently, has not had much of a norm hunting situation at all. It's usually these tournaments in Europe. In the past like year or two, places like the Charlotte Chess Center and small local venues have put on events like this, and they invite people to come play. But we really don't have something like this. More in that video on how to get chess titles. And man, these things are expensive in the United States, but in Europe, they're a little bit cheaper. But I wanted to feature this because he's a win away, one more tournament win away from becoming the youngest chess grandmaster ever. He deserves the recognition, and we will probably be seeing more of him in the future. Granted, the climb up from just becoming a grandmaster to elite is an entirely separate story, but always amazing when Prodigy Watch features a new player and a new face, and now you know one. So, as always, thank you for watching. If there's anything or anyone you want me to cover in a future video, do let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, keep on memeing, keep on dreaming. I will see you in the next video. Get out of here.